All right, good afternoon, and thank you all for joining NCDEQ for this Volkswagen Settlement Grant Management System webinar. I am Stephen Rice, an environmental specialist for the Division of Air Quality and the Level 2 Program Manager. Today I'm joined by additional DAQ staff who manage other aspects of the Volkswagen settlement. A few housekeeping rules before we get started. All attendees will be muted during today's webinar. Questions can be submitted in the Q&A box and will be addressed during the question and answer time if not covered in the presentation. The raise hand feature will be disabled until the question and answer time and will only be for those who called into the webinar by phone. For those calling in, pressing *3 will raise your hand and pressing *3 again will lower your hand. All other attendees must use the Q&A box to submit questions, and make sure you're submitting questions to the general group and not to specific panelists. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available at a later date. Finally, we have an hour to cover the grant management system in detail, but if we complete everything and answer all questions in less time, then we have the option to adjourn early. If we are not able to answer all questions by the end of the hour, we will let you know how to get your questions to us. When today's presentation becomes available on the DAQ Volkswagen website, be aware that links found in the slides will only be active when used in presentation mode. This webinar is one of many webinars for Phase 2 of the North Carolina Volkswagen Settlement. Today's presentation includes information on how to register for an NCID, how to gain access to the grant management system, also known as the GMS, in order to submit Phase 2 applications, an overview of the GMS, information on where to find answers after this webinar, and a time for questions and answers. I would like to remind attendees today that this is not a public forum for comments on the implementation of the Volkswagen settlement. To request access to the DAQ Grants Management System, you will need an NCID to complete the access request application. In this slide, we have provided links for NCID registration, as well as the How to Create an NCID guide. And I will walk through the steps of creating an NCID after the next slide. The next two slides, actually. We have a new slide today. This is a reminder that NCIDs must use the following format or your request for access will be denied. The format being your first name or initial, followed by your middle initial, this is optional, then your last name, and a number if that combination is already in use. And this is all going to be one single word, again, your first name or initial, your middle initial, and your last name. We have some fun examples below for Mr. Wiley E. Coyote. You can see there are 4 potential NCIDs that Wiley could use. Again, Wiley Coyote 2 would be if Wiley Coyote was used. The NCID system will tell you that the name is not available, and you can just put a number at the end in that case. Also, NCIDs must not be a company or organization name. The NCID is a direct link to the individual that's applying for the NCID, so the NCID is a unique name for the individual, not for the company or the organization. Some more important NCID information. If you already have an individual or government NCID, there is no need to create a new NCID. If you use any other EBS or SAP system account, you do not need a new NCID and can use your current EBS username. Also, once you have completed an NCID request, you will receive an email from ncid.notifications@nc.gov. You must click the link in that email and follow the instructions to complete the registration of your NCID before submitting the access request application. So to begin the process of creating an NCID for GMS Access, you need to go to the website ncid.gms.gov www.nc.gov and click the register link. You can see that that is highlighted here on this slide. You'll be taken to the new user registration page where you'll click the individual NCID option, which is also highlighted. Now you'll enter in account information into the text fields, and we'll talk about NCID usernames again in the next slide. When the required information is all entered, click the continue button. So we did just talk about this a few slides back, but NCID usernames must be in a first name, middle initial, last name format. If the NCID you're trying to create is already used by someone, a number can be added after the last name. And again, do not use a company or organization name as your NCID, or your GMS Access request will be returned. So now in the process, the system needs to verify your information. Code was sent to the email address that you submitted, which you'll have to come back and enter in here. Here is an example of that verification email, which contains a 6-digit code, again, which needs to be entered into the field from the previous slide. After entering the code and clicking Check Code, you'll receive a confirmation that your information has been verified. Click Continue to see the remaining setup steps. At this stage, you will need to create security questions and answers to activate your NCID account. Click the Continue button to complete this step. Here you see there are 5 security questions which you'll need to configure for your account. Once the questions are selected and the answers are provided, click Save Answers. And this completes the NCID creation process. If you experience issues with your NCID and/or password, you'll need to go to the ncid.nc.gov webpage to retrieve your username, to retrieve your password, or to unlock your account. There is a Need Help link on the page for other NCID problems or questions. It is our experience that your NCID password expires about 90 days, and you should receive an email beforehand alerting you to this. And you must read and follow all the directions on the next slides to request access to the DAQ Grants Management System, and then be approved before you can log into the system. And by our definition, approved means you received a welcome to the DAQ Enterprise Business System portal email. For new GMS users, now that you have an NCID to gain access to the Grants Management System, you will need to complete the Enterprise Business Services External Access Request application and a State of North Carolina Substitute W-9 form. You can download these forms on DAQ's Volkswagen webpage, and the rule of thumb is the earlier you do these and have access to the Grants Management System, the better. The Enterprise Business Services External Request Application is an updated version of the GMS Access Authorization form from Phase 1. When you complete the request application, you should also complete and email the State of North Carolina Substitute W-9 form to svc.ncvwapplication@ncdenr.gov. Please note that just like in Phase 1, an organization can have up to 3 authorized users in the GMS at a time, and that once the authorization is processed, you will receive an email from the NCDOT SAP Support Services email account. So for third-party access authorization forms, this applies in cases where an applicant has a third party submitting applications and other information on their behalf. The following procedures must be followed. The applicant must provide in writing that they are authorizing a third party to submit applications and other information on their behalf, and the third party will need to obtain their own unique NCID and to submit an access authorization request with the applicant's organization address information and the third party's phone number and email address. The third party's title could be contractor on the request. And before we talk about the W-9, an email from the applicant, and since we're approaching the MUD Level 2 program, let's say that the applicant in this case could be Raleigh Hills HOA. If they're sending an email authorizing a third party to submit an application on their behalf, it could read, Raleigh Hills HOA is applying for Level 2 multi-unit dwelling program funding. John Doe from Southern Energy will be the point of contact for us and will also manage the project. The letter or email must be sent along with the W-9 to the NCVW application email address. So here we see part of the first page of the State of North Carolina Substitute W-9 form. This form allows DAQ to set up an organization with new GMS users in the North Carolina accounting system in order to receive reimbursement payments. Please double check that all required fields indicated with an asterisk are filled in. And as I said before, this form and the external access request application are available to download on DAQ's Volkswagen website. We encourage you to fill in the documents electronically versus by hand. And again, we encourage you to complete and submit them as soon as possible. So some of this information was just said, but all of it is important. An organization is allowed up to 3 authorized users at a time. If you are a current user of the NCDOT grants system, use your username on the EBS external request application. Once your GMS registration is complete, you will receive a Welcome to the DAQ Enterprise Business System email, and a step-by-step guide and tutorials are available in the grants management system. And in a little bit, we will go through one of those tutorials. Also to note, if an employee leaves your organization and this employee has GMS access, you must notify your program manager so that that user can be removed from the system. NCIDs expire every 90 days. If your NCID is locked, you can unlock your account from the NCID webpage. And if you receive a pop-up screen saying that you need to change your password, close out of the grant management system and go to the NCID webpage to change your password. Once you've changed your password in NCID, you can log back into the grants management system. So now we've come to the grants management system demo. I won't go into fine detail about the multi-unit dwelling application, since I will cover that in the program webinar on May 16th. But I will tell you how to use the GMS tutorials and how to submit an application. This slide has links to both the GMS portal and a sample application found on the MUD program webpage. What you see here is the screen where you will enter your NCID username and password. So after logging in to the grant management system, you'll see a Division of Air Quality Grants tile under your partner applications list. After clicking that tile, you will be taken to your GMS homepage. On your GMS homepage, you can find the link to the DAQ training library, as well as the links to create, to view, and to edit an application. You can see the arrow pointing to the Create New Application option. So let's continue as if we're clicking the Create New Application link. After clicking the Create New Application link, you would be prompted to search through the available applications. Clicking the search button here will list the links for all open applications, and is easier than remembering and selecting the program ID by hand. The program ID for the multi-unit dwelling program is or will be found on the RFP, but again, instead of copying and pasting or remembering, clicking search will bring up a list of open applications. So here you see all of DAQ's active Volkswagen applications, and this is where the link to the multi-unit dwelling application will be when it goes live on June 13th. At that time, you are ready to start an application, you will click on the link to view the application form. And this is the first page of the application. Looks very similar to what anyone that applied in Phase 1 did see. Without providing specifics to the program requirements, you will need to complete all aspects of the application and to submit the application as a first-come, first-served program before the funds have been exhausted. The ability to save an application is found on every tab, and the ability to submit the application is found specifically in the certification tab. If I really did start an application and opted to save it before submitting, let's see how I would edit that application with a tutorial found in the GMS training library. So I'm going to training library. Again, this is the home page where you would enter your NCID username and password. I can show you this briefly. Here is the Division of Air Quality Grants tile, which you would click. It would open up a new page, and you would see this information, specifically some of these options in the search forum. Again, we talked about create new application, and as well as edit application form and to view application. But now we're going to go through the process of the edit application tutorial. You can see to access the tutorial, you could click the DAQ training library link here. Since this is an internal user account, I have here the external account, which is what you would see if you clicked that training library link. So we have here a variety of tutorials that you can review, that you can utilize as you go through the process of applying for any of our Volkswagen applications. But again, if we went and started an application for a multi-unit dwelling program, we want to come back and continue to edit that application, we can review that process here. So I will click the Edit Application Tutorial. We can see a step-by-step written account of the process to edit an application form. But if we click this play button here, we'll be able to see a step-by-step video account. I know I'm a visual person, so let's click this button and go through the steps. All right, so this is exactly what you would see in your GMS account. The first page is a welcome. The simulation will guide you through the steps of editing a previously saved application. So again, it highlights the edit application form link, which you would click. It's going to go through the process of entering your application ID. This is something that's given to you when you save your application. There's a confirmation page which includes your application ID. You can enter that here, just like the guide is showing you, or a way to bring up the application a little bit faster, again, is to click the search button. At that point, you would see the link for any of your applications come up. So if you've only been working on one application, it would automatically reference that application. But we'll continue the video and see that we're entering the application ID by hand. So after that's entered, you would click search, and there is the link, the reference link to your application. And at this point, you can make any necessary changes to the application. You can enter information into tabs that you had not yet gotten to. You could change information on any of the tabs that you had started. But again, you can only do this through the edit application process. And once you're done editing, you can click the save and close if you are not done just yet. And again, you get the confirmation page that you have successfully saved your application. Even though it's blank right here or hidden behind this window, your application ID would be found here. That's something that you can write and keep for your records to reference back to. And also at this point, it is kind of hidden behind this window, but you can attach documents and other required information to your application here. But yes, at this point, you have successfully edited and saved the application. If you were at the point where you felt you didn't have to make any more corrections or adjustments, you could go all the way to that certification tab and have submitted that application. So again, that was a short exploration of the GMS and its features. But after you gain access to the GMS, we encourage you to log in and play around with these tutorials to get more comfortable with the system before the application goes live. And also, again, a reminder that a more detailed account of the multi-unit dwelling program, the application, and that entire process will be given next week on May 16th. Okay, so in closing, the school bus, transit bus, clean heavy-duty diesel, DC fast, and level 2 programs are all reimbursement programs. We will not accept paper, faxed, or scanned applications. All applications must be entered and submitted via the DAQ Grants Management System. If you are not currently on our mailing list and would like to receive email updates about the Volkswagen Settlement Program, please send an email with the word subscribe in the subject line to daq.nc_bwgrants@ncdenr.gov. So if you have questions following today's webinar, you can visit the frequently asked questions section of the Volkswagen website. The link for that is found on the slide. And if you don't find your answers there, you are free to email your questions to the general NC_VW grants email account. There are several resources and partners that we worked with in Phase 1. They have plenty of experience with these types of projects, and you are more than welcome to utilize them in Phase 2. Contact information for this list is available on the DAQ Volkswagen website. Here are your DEQ General Volkswagen contacts for Phase 2. Brian Phillips is the Mobile Sources Compliance Branch Supervisor. Sean Taylor is DAQ's Public Information Officer. And Robin Barros is our Allied Program Supervisor and has been assisting the Volkswagen team with the Volkswagen Outreach. And here are your Volkswagen program contacts for Phase 2. Again, I'm Stephen Rice, the Level 2 program contact. But if you have interest in other programs, the program lead and their contact information is found here. So this concludes today's Grant Management System webinar, and now we will address questions that were collected in the Q&A box. Our host will now attempt to enable the raise hand feature for those who had called into the webinar by phone. Pressing star 3 will raise your hand, and pressing star 3 again will lower your hand. All other attendees must use the Q&A box to submit their questions. So Volkswagen team, I am ready for questions if we have received any.
Hi, Stephen. Yes, we have received a couple of questions. The first question from Jen says, "Hi, thanks for having this. For our reference, will this presentation be recorded, available for us to refer to later on?"
Oh, hi, Jen. Yes, we will have a recording of today's presentation available on the Volkswagen webpage. We will also have the PDF version of these slides to reference as well. We're going to try to get them up as soon as possible. And when they are accessible, you can view them and save them as much as you want, but all this information will be made available very soon.
Okay. Our next question, also from Jen, says, "Thanks. If an individual from the homeowners association is submitting on behalf of the homeowners association rather than a contractor for the HOA, do we still need a third-party authorization form application?
So Jen, if the person applying is employed by the HOA and the organization behind the project is that HOA, you would not need a third-party authorization form in that case. When an employee of the organization that's applying is the one completing the application, they just need to submit their EBS access request application along with the W-9 tax information from that organization, and then you as an individual with your individual NCID will be linked to the organization within the grants management system. And when it's time to submit an application, you should see that your account and the organization are linked in the application.
Okay, Stephen, the next question. How long does it take to get access once I submit my request for the grant management system?
So to start that process, the NCID, when you complete the steps for getting your NCID, that account is created almost instantaneously when you're done. There's a very short waiting period on that. And I start there because in order to complete the EBS request application, you will first need that NCID. But specifically, when it comes to submitting a complete EBS access request, if you've done everything properly, I believe we're expecting anywhere from a few days into a week to fully process, where you would receive that confirmation email. It takes that long because we don't process this internally. When you submit that request application, it goes directly to that SAP team, and they're the ones that are reviewing the information. So the most we can do is give updates, but we're not in control of that process. We've been informed that, and through our experience, that the process can take a few days, but it can also take up to a week, depending on how many people are submitting those forms at one given time. So that's why we really emphasize don't wait till the last minute, because you'll be competing against a bunch of other people that are trying to get approved, and all those approvals happening at the same time can increase the amount of time it takes.
And Stephen, just to add to that, it has been taking longer, more like closer to the full 7 days or so. So people definitely need to get the stuff in earlier than later, because it is taking more than just a couple of days, at least recently.
The multi-unit program is definitely the latter half of all the Volkswagen programs, and that means even though you're not directly, we'll say, competing against like diesel projects or DC fast projects, the people that want to submit applications for those programs are also going through this process. So the amount of time it takes to process anyone interested in multi-unit dwelling applications, the amount or the ability to get into the grants management system is also impacted by other program applicants.
Thank you, Stephen. Jen would also like to know, does the application system time out after a certain amount of time or require saving during entering to ensure information entered is not lost?
Yes, the grants management system does have a timeout. I think if you're inactive for 15 minutes, it's either half an hour or 15 minutes, the system will give you an alert saying that within 5 minutes you will be automatically logged out. It definitely would be recommended, especially if you don't have all your information in front of you, and you're gonna you maybe take a longer than anticipated time to complete the application, to do some frequent saves. There's no harm in saving the application. And then if you do get logged out, or if you need to come back to it the next day, again, you wouldn't start a brand new application. You would go to the Edit Application Form link on your Grants Management System homepage. You can enter in by hand your application ID, or just click the search button, which will reference your application ID automatically. You click the link for your application, and then you can continue on just as you were before when you were saving that application.
Okay, Stephen, Michael would like to know, as a property manager and registered agent of a landowner, do I need third-party access to apply on behalf of my client?
I know we're going to cover this topic in more detail next week. The short answer is this depends on who is submitting the application. So, Michael, you as the property owner, if you were submitting the application through your organization, then you would not need third-party access authorization. If the if another organization, maybe that was leasing the building, again, if we're talking about multi-unit dwellings, was applying, and you wanted access on their behalf, then in that case you would supply a third-party access authorization form. If you want to talk more about this after the presentation today, we certainly can, or like I said, we'll cover this next week. So I definitely recommend in a week's time joining the full program webinar that I'll be hosting.
Thank you, Stephen. That is currently all of the questions we have in the Q&A box. You may want to put it back to the slide with your contact information on it.
Great minds think alike, Melanie, especially for Michael, if he wanted to follow up with me before next week. Again, my contact information is right here. We'll give people a few more minutes to think for questions. That's perfectly fine.
Stephen, one more thing
Okay.
to stress is when you submit a request for access to the grant management system, you receive an email from the team asking you for the state substitute W-9 form. We only accept the state substitute W-9 form, not the federal form, or otherwise they'll be returned to you. So that email usually has a copy of that form attached to it, just for awareness.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Brian. That is a good point. We have seen people submit federal forms and other forms of tax-related documentation. We might come off as sticklers, but we do require the specific North Carolina W-9 form. Again, this presentation, which you'll have access to later, has the links for that directly. If you go to the required forms page on the Volkswagen website, we also have a link to that form. We try to include it in as many places as possible. And yes, like Brian said, we are requiring that form in particular.
Stephen, there are still no new questions in the Q&A box.
Okay, well, I hope that means that was the information today was straightforward and easy to digest. I really appreciate everyone's attendance today. I hope this webinar was helpful. Again, we're on the slide where everyone's contact information is, including mine for the multi-unit dwelling program. But if you're interested in other programs as well, everyone's contact information is found here. Again, next week, there will be the full program webinar that covers everything A to Z. We'll cover this topic again with Grants Management System Access, but we'll also cover the requirements of a multi-unit dwelling program application and what a project could look like. So definitely recommend you register for that. If you have any questions on how to register for that, definitely let me know. I'll point you in the right direction. And And if that's all that we have today, again, thank you for your time, and we look forward to working with you in phase 2.